My name's Craig. I'm from Enfield, which is a borough in London, England, and now I live in Jelgava in Latvia.
Hello, Craig.
Hi, Mara. How are you?
It's nice to meet you today.
Nice to meet you, of course, as well.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us and telling us a little bit about yourself and about how you ended up here in Latvia. And why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about where you're from?
Okay, so I'm from London, okay, and London is split into many areas. They're called boroughs, and I'm from a borough called Enfield, yeah. And Enfield is the top London borough, okay. So when I was younger, we had these T-shirts and it said like Enfield, top London borough. And I understood top to mean best. So I was going around, I'm from the top London borough. And, you know, grown-ups would just nod and say, yes, you are. Yeah, and that was it. And then I realized top meant just the location. Yeah, the most northernmost borough. Yeah, so I think I learned that much later on because I was so proud of coming from the best borough in London. So basically, yeah, it's right at the top of London, like suburbs. So you've got the, you know, best of being in the city, but also on the edge. So you're quite close to sort of the countryside and nature as well. Yeah, it's so what happens in London traditionally is most people in the centre, when they get a bit older and when they have family, they tend to move a bit further out. So people in the centre move to the suburbs, for example, Enfield. Maybe a bit later on, they move from Enfield further out into other counties in England, closer to the sea, perhaps, you know, for retirement age. So you tend to move out in London. So most people who live in the centre of London now, and the young people, they're probably not traditional Londoners. There's a lot of foreign workers working in London. It's a good place for young people. So yeah, that's how London works really. I know in Latvia, most people do the opposite direction. They move from a small place into the city for work. But as you get older in London or England, it's the opposite, moving away from the cities for a more relaxed life. Yeah. So I was born in Enfield. When I was born in an incubator and wrapped in tinfoil because I was cold, small, and but not really premature. Just the day before the expected date. So yes, I was born in Enfield. I grew up in Enfield. I went to school in Enfield. Yeah, I spent most of my childhood around this area, and this area is a mixture. So when you come to a place like Latvia, mostly you look around, you see sort of the same sort of coloured faces, but in Enfield, it's a mix of all different diversities, all different religions, all different cultures. So when I went to school, you know, I was in secondary school. I went to quite a large secondary school. There were 1,000 pupils, and in my class, you know, half the class were from different places originally, or their families were. So, you know, you had people from Bangladesh, India, Jamaica, Africa, all different places. And for me, it's just normal. It's just growing up, and I had friends from all different backgrounds, and everyone was potentially a friend, and it was really good to grow up in this really diverse area. Yeah. So yeah, that's Enfield really. What else famous in Enfield? Oh, maybe if you look online, you could type in Enfield poltergeist, and there was a paranormal activity that happened in this small borough in Enfield. And you can look at it. I think it was in the 1980s or late 1970s.
There are a couple of films, I think.
Yeah, I think they've
about
just
it as well.
quite recently. Yeah. So that happened in the location where I'm from. Yeah. There was also a weapons factory as well a long time ago. So they had the Royal Enfield small arms factories. They were making weaponry. And I think also a kind of motorbike comes from Enfield as well, some sort of Enfield. You can look this up online. But yeah, I mean, that's where I'm from.
Yeah, so a small community, even though it's technically part of this bigger city, sounds like a smaller community that feels like a community, maybe.
I think over time, like most communities on the edge of a big city, it sort of gets eaten up by the city. So maybe when it began, it was outside of London, and then London is sort of expanding in size, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, gradually and gradually. So it probably started off as a village, but now it's become more of a city inside a city, if you understand what I'm saying. Growing and growing and growing. So if I went back now, or when I went back previously, it was like I was looking around and there's a lot more sort of buildings, things are going up, a lot more housing, apartments. And it's like, I used to play on the field here, yeah. And now, yeah, it's sometimes some of the places are unrecognizable. So yeah, so you have that community spirit to start with, but now maybe not so much.
More people moving out that way, and therefore making it more city-like, and also people who aren't part of that community. Yeah, you see a lot of that in New York City as well, where certain parts of New York kind of move to outer parts of the city, but also outside New Jersey, other places. You see a similar phenomenon.
I think also that sort of that where you commute from. So in the UK, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger because the cost of housing is becoming non-affordable. So in this area now, people can't afford, so they move like 10 kilometers or 10 miles further out. And then people can afford that area for a certain amount of time. And then it becomes unaffordable again, so you have to move out further. So in the end, the time it takes people to commute to work every day, it's getting greater and greater and greater. So a commute in the UK, for most people, a very normal commute could be an hour and a half on a train every day in one direction. So someone could spend 3 hours or 4 hours a day driving or on a train or on a bus, and that's normal. Whereas in Latvia, you know, half an hour away from the location, people look at you and say, like, you're traveling that far. So in different countries, there's a different sort of acceptability of how long you should spend traveling per day for work.
Yeah. I've again experienced the same thing in New York, longer commutes. In other parts of the US as well, much shorter commutes. And in Riga, even though it's a city, you're right, the commutes are much shorter. And then you go to smaller Latvian cities and they're almost non-existent. At least for big city people, they feel non-existent because they're so brief. And how, for people who don't know or who have never been to London or the surrounding areas, how would you describe what people are like? So you talked a little bit about the diversity and the fact that there are lots of backgrounds, lots of religions, probably lots of languages, lots of culture, lots of different foods. What other ways would you describe how people interact with each other that may be different from other places?
Yeah, it's difficult just to say, you know, everyone's friendly because everyone's different. So I would say, I don't know if I can use the word people becoming unfriendly. I don't think that's the case. I just think because there's so much diversity, people find it difficult to communicate freely with languages and express themselves. And if someone answers you without the correct intonation, then maybe you think they're an angry person, or maybe you think they're being rude, but they just haven't got a total grasp of the language. So maybe because of this, is creating maybe some issues, yeah, or maybe they don't want to talk to you because they're afraid of making mistakes themselves. And then people don't think about that, because I'm a teacher, so I know how people feel sometimes, why they don't communicate, or like, oh, that sounds a bit rude, but because it's to do with their lack of being able to use this language so well. But other people don't know that, so they just assume incorrectly that this is the reason. So, oh, people don't talk to me, they don't know the language, they're rude, they want to keep themselves to themselves. Yeah. And traditionally, Londoners are supposed to be some of the most friendly people in the world. You go down, how are you? And when my grandmother and my grandfather was alive, and I used to go and stay with them, this was the case. When they walked down to the market to buy food or to buy whatever they bought from the markets, like they would always stop and speak to quite a few people on the way and have this sort of time for them. And maybe now, because of our busy working lives, and we just don't have that time, or we don't think we have that time to spare as well. So I think most people in life try to be friendly, or want to be friendly, but just some elements make it more difficult now.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like when you're talking about friendly, because this differs in different cultures, it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about are niceties in language, niceties in communication, maybe some niceties in body language. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah. Also just finding the time. So, I mean, like, if somebody like dropped their shopping bag on the floor and their shopping spilled out, I just wonder, would the first person who saw it stop and help, or would they think, I'm too busy, I can't spare 2 minutes to sort of stop? Someone else would do it, in a moment. And maybe it's more like that now. I think like in businesses and shops, I think people are still friendly because that's the nature of the business. And, so when you go into a shop in England, I still think the majority of the time this is happening. So you go in there, hello there, that will be, 35 pence. Thank you. Have a good day. Yeah. So there's niceties there, which is really nice. So when I go back to the UK, I really notice it now, because here, maybe they don't use it so much. There are people who do use it, but not every day. So when I go back, maybe I'm hearing now, like, wow, it's overly friendly here. It's too much for me now. Yeah. Or, so it's really interesting when you notice things. So like in England, someone comes out of like a public toilet, a public toilet door, like in, I don't know, Starbucks or Costa Coffee or something, and they come out of the toilet, and the first thing they say if someone's just trying to get in is they say, sorry. And it's like, well, you don't have to apologize just for walking out of the toilet. But it's like an instant reaction. You say to someone like, sorry for inconveniencing you for 1 second, or being in your way or something. So you do tend to notice that a lot more when you're out of that sort of, out of the loop or out of that area, so to speak, for a certain amount of time, because it just becomes routine and habitual. So I do notice those sort of differences a lot now being away.
So kind of acknowledging and not just being aware of, but actually verbally acknowledging people around you. Oh, sorry, excuse me. I'm in your space as well, and saying something about it.
I think it's nice, but at the same time, sometimes you think you don't really need to say it, but thank you anyway. I think it's nice. So why not be overly friendly? What's the problem? Does it cause any problems with anyone? No, not really. So I think people should try to be more friendly in life, including myself. So, sometimes you have to analyze yourself. I mean, I could have, done this better, or said this, or, maybe changed your ways a little bit. Some cultural things as well. So like in England, when you cross a road, like at a crossing, like a zebra crossing, you give sort of the acknowledgement with your hand, like thank you. Yeah. Here, when you do that, people like look at you in the car like you're some sort of space alien, like what the hell are you doing? I need to stop by the laws. I'm not doing it because I want to, sort of reaction. Yeah. So you don't have to thank me. I need to stop anyway. Yeah. I want to keep driving, but I can't. Yeah. So some things like that, some people might think that's a bit weird as well. So, culturally, there are differences as well, just with gestures.
And I'm with you on all these things, because I also grew up in a part of the US that says sorry a lot, so much so that people say you don't have to say sorry all the time. And I also grew up with all the hand gestures, all the gestures, both from drivers giving little hand gestures off of their steering wheel, as well as people. And I've had this conversation with several of the interviewees of this idea of then being in a new place, deciding what do you continue to do, what do you bring with you, and what do you adjust to. So for me, I have a crossing right by my apartment that I use almost every day. And I would say 90% of the time still put my hand up when someone visibly slows and is acknowledging me and isn't just braking at the last minute. And, for me, I don't care if they think I'm weird or not, because I'm still acknowledging them. But that's something that I've very consciously made a decision now, like, I don't care. I'm going to keep on doing this.
I still do it, yeah, because it might encourage other people to follow suit. And I think anyway, we've in Latvia, many Latvians have lived in other foreign countries in the world, and they know this now. So when they come back, they also bring back those sort of good habits. So even Latvians who have lived abroad are starting to do this now, or doing things differently. So yeah, we learn from our peers and we learn from what's happening around us. So why not bring it back?
Yeah. So it sounds like you were exposed to much of the world in the regards to having lots of people around you that were from different places or had different cultures that they were bringing in, even if generationally they had been living in London. What about actual travel? Did you do much travel around England, outside of England, before you lived abroad?
Yes. Well, as a child, no. Mostly only in England. Like, so my family, my parents, they just mostly travelled in England. I think the first time I went abroad was at the age of 8. I went to, the typical tourist place for English people, Spain. So, one of these package holidays when you stay in the hotel with all the other Brits, and by the swimming pool, put your towel down, try to beat the Germans down to the sun lounges, something like this. So, one of those things everyone does when they're young, yeah. And then the next time I went abroad was 11. So my grandparents actually took me to Florida, to Disney World or Disneyland, whichever one it is, yeah, and centers around there. And it was like a dream holiday for us, because we didn't come from a rich family. So these holidays to America were, at the time in the early 1990s, were very expensive, transatlantic. And it was sort of like, so my grandparents, they had 2 children. One was my mum and one was my uncle. So my mum's brother. And unfortunately, well, he was a very healthy man, very sporty. He was in a water polo team. He was in the police force, Metropolitan Police in England. And at a very young age, about 30, he contracted multiple sclerosis. So his condition is getting worse and worse every year. So by the time we went to America, he was confined to a wheelchair, and he couldn't go to the toilet by himself. He had sort of a bottle on his leg, and etc. Yeah. So it was sort of this last opportunity for him to go with he had 2 small children as well, to take his small children together as a family to go and experience something sort of breathtaking, or something you wouldn't have been able to do before. So my grandparents, who were a little bit more financially well off than my parents, paid for us to go as well. Yeah. So going there was a great experience. To go to America, it was unbelievable. Like donuts for breakfast as an 11-year-old child. Not this sort of toast with butter on or something. No, donuts, sweet things. It was like incredible. All these shops, these outlet centers and malls and stuff, like so many sunglasses, funky t-shirts, everything. And it was like the exchange rate must have been like like magnificent at the time, because it was like, wow, this is so cheap, you know. And I got my first like handheld computer bought for me, this Game Boy thing, and it was like, oh, it was amazing, you know, because the price of these Game Boys in England were really expensive. So it was like just a dream. It was amazing to go there and experience it. And as a kid, like you didn't really think about like your uncle's illness. You just thought about some of the benefits that came with it. So because he was in a wheelchair, we got to go on the rides quick. We could just skip the queue, jump the queue, and go straight on. So it was really cool as a kid. But you know, of course, now when you're an adult, you realize, oh my god, like terrible. Like these children, they don't have a you know, father now. I haven't got an uncle, and you know how, you know, how much pain must he have been in for all those years that he was alive for after he was diagnosed with the illness. Yeah. So yeah, so basically, so 8 years Spain, 11 America, and then after that, it was when I became an adult. So first holiday abroad with your friends at 18, going somewhere hot again, partying, lots of alcohol, sort of thing, like somewhere like Tenerife, yeah. Cyprus is another one, you know, Greece, a few party holidays with your friends, but nothing really cultural, you know, so much. It's only when I became sort of even more grown up, when I was working and away from sort of going on holiday with my friends and getting into a relationship, that I started to have a lot more sort of weekend breaks, you know, because of these cheap airlines like Ryanair, Wizz Air, and these sort of places. It made it really accessible to go to these other places. So you're going to places in Germany, Belgium, Poland, Czech Republic, etc. So there's a lot of weekend trips mostly. Yeah. So I think in 1 year I went on about 10 or 11 different holidays.
Oh, wow.
They were like 1 night or 2 night places that you could fit in. So really my interest was just traveling and seeing as much as I could see. Yeah. But the main travel happened at the age of 30, because I think I was having maybe a midlife crisis. I got to an age where I found I was just working so hard, working every day, always in debt. So in England, you have credit cards, you have loans, you have overdrafts. And I was just in negative all the time, just surviving, working to survive. Yeah. And, you know, you had these little treats now and again, but you had to put that on your credit card, or you had to, so I think working out your expenses per month, it was like, you know, maybe it was like 0 or minus, like, or minus 100, your expenses, you know, after taking away, you know, getting your salary and taking away all the bills and stuff, you were sort of in negative sort of situation there. And I was in a stage where, you know, I was tired of owning a house and having to pay bills and maintaining the house, being stuck in one area. Because at the time I was living in Cambridgeshire, which is about 2 hours away from London, because I moved there because I met a girl and she lived about 2.5 hours away in a place called Peterborough. And it was like, I still need to work in London, so can we move somewhere in between? Yeah, so I was living about 1.5 hours away from work, and she was then moved an hour from her place. So we were traveling in different directions for work. And I felt in that situation, I was isolated because I moved away from my friends. So, and my commute was long, I was more tired, and the lifestyle really affected me. So, you know, I just had enough of everything. And I think my behavior I was not the best person at the time either. So I just decided to end my relationship with my girlfriend of 9 years, quit my job, sell my car, sell as many possessions as I could have, and just make a fresh start. So when I decided to end my relationship, that was sort of the worst year of my life after that, because we had the joint house together and we had to sell it, and there was lots of arguments over finances. And yeah, I was living in the house alone, and yeah, it was difficult. It was horrible. Yeah. So then I was questioning myself, did I make the right decision, you know? And in the end, when we finally sold the house, and after a lot of arguing, I was then living with my grandfather, you know, a 30-year-old man living with his grandfather. It's a bit unusual, a bit strange for a lot of people. But for me, my grandfather was, you know, he was my role model in life, you know. My parents, well, my mum and dad divorced when I was 6, so my father played no active role in my life after that. And my mum, she was dependent on the alcohol and the drinks. So really, I was really independent. Yeah, I moved out at the age of 20 to get my own place. So I became independent really early. So living with my grandfather, I missed the independence, but at the same time, I really enjoyed those 3 or 4 months I lived with him, because I just loved the man, you know, like I never saw him argue, I never saw him get angry. Everyone in the family loved him, and that's the person that I aspire to be in my own life. Yeah. So just living with him, and while I lived with him, to keep him active, I used to be a postman in England for a little while, and on my sort of delivery round, there was a place where they bred chickens, like, and they sold the eggs and produced the eggs. And they actually, I bought 6 chickens, like these little baby chickens from them. And it gave my grandfather a project to look after these chickens, feed them, grow them, give him eggs. And his neighbor told me that basically he thinks that's what kept my grandfather alive for another 10 years, extended his life, because after his wife died, you know, it's quite lonely for someone and they don't have a role in life. And this gave him some focus, you know. So when I saw him talking to his chickens, like, come here, chicks, come in, giving them names and stuff, and building a shed for them, and yeah, collecting the eggs and giving them to his neighbors so they could talk to him. And yeah, I think that was one of the best decisions I've ever made, actually. So yeah, I really loved living with him, even though it was a short period. We grew and we understood each other a lot more. And then after that, basically during that period, I had decided to buy an aeroplane ticket to Brazil. Yeah, so I just decided to travel with the intention of never going back to the UK again and settling in Australia. That was sort of that plan or idea I had in mind. So I roped a friend into coming with me for the start of the journey, because I was a little bit worried, because yes, I had been traveling before, but the longest travel had only been 2 weeks with some friends to hold my hand, you know. So yeah, for me, I needed someone to hold my hand, to be honest, at the starting point. So he came with me, and he spent 6 weeks at the start of my travels traveling. So we flew to Brazil. We went to Rio de Janeiro to start with. And we traveled just around South America. Well, he traveled with me for the first 6 weeks. So Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina and Uruguay. And then he flew home back to work. Yeah, and I continued my travels around the rest of South America and on from there as well, staying in hostels. So I don't know if anyone stayed in hostels, but there's other people who are in a similar position as you. So you just meet new people every day. You form these, I don't know, friendships, maybe, you can call it, not strong friendships, but some sort of friendship, because you have some mutual connection, mutual interest perhaps. And you go, do you want to come traveling with me tomorrow? Do you want to come here? And you end up going somewhere with someone else for most of your travel. So it's never really lonely in some sense. Yeah, I guess you do have an element of loneliness though, because they're not close connections. So you do still wish that somebody close to you was there. So when you go back to your country, you can speak. Do you remember this? Do you remember that? I can't speak to anyone really about, do you remember that beautiful sunset over Niagara Falls, or in South America, Iguazu Falls? Because no one has experienced it with me. So yeah, so I miss having someone to talk to these things about. But when you're traveling, you always mostly have someone with you anyway, to come with you for that 2-day period, that week period, maybe 10 days if you really get on, something like that. So yeah, I traveled to South America, spent 6 months in South America, traveling around. Loved it. Yeah. It's my favorite continent, I have to say, in the world. I would say the people are really friendly as well. Yeah. Culturally very different, but my God, like they were, I mean, there it's all to do with family. Yeah, I know family is important to everyone in the world, but you know, in England, a lot of family members live 2 hours away from each other because of work. So work dictates where you live. In these places, they live very close together, the majority of people. So when they're having dinner together on a Saturday afternoon, the family is about 40 people, you know, and there's a big amount of food on the table. Yeah. And even though a lot of these people come from poor situations, they still always have food for guests. You know, they would invite me, you know, someone would invite me to join their family for dinner, and I would feel like the king, because first of all, it's very nice of them to invite me, because I don't think I would invite many new people I've met to meet my family. One, because I wouldn't want to embarrass them with my mother, but secondly, you know, your family is like private to you, and it's very hard to invite people into your family unit. But there, it's just like, yeah, come in and join your family now with us. Yes. Yeah? So that was a very nice experience. Yeah. Then meeting all these people, friendly people, people who just want to come up to you and chat as well. Yeah. Yeah, I really did enjoy it, South America. And South America as a continent, for anyone who hasn't been, it's very different from top to bottom. And so in the top, it's very hot. You have lots of desert, red wine, sort of a lot of history in Peru and Bolivia as well, Machu Picchu. The salt flats in Bolivia, amazing. Go there, yeah. And at the bottom, you've got Patagonia, which is like glaciers, penguins, icebergs. Yeah, it's totally different. Yeah. And also in South America, you have a lot of small pockets of different communities as well. So you might go down to South America at the bottom and you start seeing blonde ladies or blonde men, because after World War II, I believe, a lot of Germans sort of went to South America to live, to escape the situation there. And then they formed sort of communities. And I think people in Wales, next to England, there's a lot of Welsh communities there as well, because some of the towns are Welsh names, like Treulw, Gaiman and stuff. So you can go to these small villages in South America and have English tea, and you can also get different types of German style beer in Patagonia as well. So it's very interesting. I would never have known any of these facts before I started traveling around these areas. Yeah. And in South America at the bottom, you have the southernmost city in the world, which is Ushuaia, which is only about 500 kilometers from Antarctica. So actually you can go down there and you can be invited, or you can pay to go on cruises to Antarctica, which, you know, would be amazing to go and, you know, see Antarctica untouched really by, you know, us humans who typically go around destroying the planet. You know? So yeah, just amazing. And then from there, so after 6 months in South America, I flew to New Zealand, Auckland. I traveled around the 2 islands for about 6 or 7 weeks. Again, interesting place. Two very different islands again, a bit like South America. North Island, hotter perhaps a little bit, volcanic. So you have volcanoes. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, a lot of the filming was done there. Yeah. South Island, you can have glaciers like Patagonia again. So I guess when the world was joined together, when it sort of started, you know, parting, away from each other, divided by the oceans and seas. I guess those two places are sort of connected together and they separated. So that's why it's much like Patagonia in some ways. But when I went to New Zealand to start with, I didn't like it so much as South America, because first of all, when you were staying in hostels in South America, everything was included in the price. So like breakfast was included, Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi. And when you went to these more Western countries, everything's payable. So you go in there, put out the Wi-Fi code, and they'll be like, yeah, that's 10 euros a day or something, or dollars in New Zealand. Yeah, could have some breakfast. Yeah, that's another $10. So it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be bankrupt here, especially on the backpackers sort of allowance, you know, and so that was a bit of a shock to the system when I went there. But yeah, so, but the country's beautiful if you stay away from the cities. City life is not so interesting, but outside of the cities, it's yeah, really beautiful. You can do some amazing treks, walks. Yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, the wildlife as well. It's impressive. Sea lions, penguins, albatrosses. Yeah, I think New Zealand has it's the only place in the world where on mainland albatrosses nest. And these are these huge birds with like 3-meter wingspan. So it was really impressive to see these birds up close and personal. Yeah. Then after 7 weeks in New Zealand, I flew to Sydney, Australia. And basically, my plan was to travel to buy a car and to drive across Australia to the other side to Perth, and then work there for most of that year, getting money so to replenish my funds that I had spent in New Zealand and South America. So I bought a car from some Finnish backpackers, I believe, and I just stayed in Sydney for about a week having a look around. And I started driving around the coast. So I stopped in a few places along the coast. Saw nature in its finest. Yeah, kangaroos jumping around, just you know, in nature. You know, all these different creatures indigenous to the country, so you would never see anywhere else. Echidna, so that's like a porcupine, and so what the hell is that? You know, and I think this is bird. It's called like an ibis. Has a really long, like you can look at ibis. Yeah. Has a really long sort of beak or snout or something. Yeah, so they're everywhere in Sydney, and it's like, what is it? And then locals say that's just an ibis. It's just like your equivalent of a pigeon. So pigeons are everywhere where I'm from, just causing a mess. Yeah, and this is the equivalent. But for me, it's like, wow, this is wow, this is cool. Yeah, and the locals must have thinking, why are you taking pictures of like this bird that's everywhere? Yeah, basically. Yeah. And bats as well. Bats are in the parks in Sydney, so that you look up in the tree, there's a bat sleeping like in the middle of the daytime, or lots of them in the trees. Like, yeah. So the wildlife is just really, oh my God, what's that? Yeah. Australia is such a dangerous country because of the wildlife. You know, most of them can kill you. You know, so if you see a snake, yeah, you don't want to go near it. Spider, yeah, it can kill you. Yeah. Kangaroo could kill you, could punch you in the head, I guess. So yeah, there's just dangers around you. Sharks in the water, yeah. So I'm surprised Australians are so laid back, because I'll be like, oh my God, I'm not going in the water. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, basically traveling around the coast, so stopping off in a few places. Stopped off in Melbourne. So I applied for a few jobs in Australia because I thought maybe I could stay here, but no, it wasn't possible. Unless you have a specific sort of qualification or skill which they're short of, and they didn't have any that I was qualified in yet. So then after that, I flew to Asia. I flew to Kuala Lumpur, yeah, in Malaysia, yeah. So I went to a few other places as well over a 6-week period. So Malaysia, Singapore, Bali in Indonesia, and Thailand. as well. And then I flew back to London from Kuala Lumpur after just under 2 years. So I was away for 20 months, I believe. Yeah. Asia, interesting place as well. But the only thing I would say with some of these places like Asia, even more so than South America, is because these are poorer countries where people need money to survive a lot more maybe than us. A lot more people are in your face, like trying to sell you stuff, and you don't feel comfortable walking down the street with surrounded by about 10 or 20 people thrusting leaflets into your face or DVDs or trying to sell you something. So it can be quite claustrophobic for some people. So yeah, that's different, just to get used to that if you can. But again, culturally, it's very different. So going to all these places offer you a new experience and educate you like no classroom could. Yeah, and I think the reason I went traveling was I said when I left, like, I'm not going to do the same job when I get back. I'm going to be a better person. I'm going to do a better job. I'm going to meet someone nice to spend my time with. Yeah. And I achieved none. Yeah. Nothing. Yeah, none of those things. Yeah. I had a great time. Yeah. Along the way, but I went back probably maybe in some aspects a better person, because I learned a lot. But at the same time, I also picked up a lot of bad habits as well, worse habits. So my drinking had gone off the scale, because every day you're meeting new people and it's very sociable to say, let's have a drink. So whereas at home you could do it, Saturday on a Friday night when you're not working, maybe once or twice a week. Here, it's like 7 days. It's like party time every time, like boom, 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 boom. When I started working in Australia, of course, because I had the work again, I didn't do this, yeah, because you have something that you need to do. You have some sort of routine. But when you have no routine, you wake up every day and like, what can I do today? Yeah, I don't need to do it. Okay, let's have a drink, or let's do something. Yeah. So yeah, after Asia, it got back into that routine again after South America, and it was like, and in Asia, everything's cheap, party, every evening is like, my God, my body's given up on me here. So yeah, I just wanted to get out of that sort of situation and get back to some sort of normality. But I did turn back, in England. My brother came and picked me up from the airport. It was amazing to see him after 2 years. But it was like, I felt a bit of a failure coming back, because I had set out not to come back. I'd sold everything, like literally. So what am I coming back for? Like family, that's it. Yeah. So I was back to square one again, living with my grandfather. Thank God he was still alive, because I thought I wouldn't see him again, after I left, because I thought I'd be gone forever. So I got to see him, which was a major positive for me. See him so healthy. Got to see my family. So I was living between two places there. So I lived with my brother until they had enough of me. Yeah, taking up an extra space in their private family house, And then they say, oh, maybe you should think about looking for somewhere else. And I got the hint. So then I went back to my grandfather. But it was like, okay, what am I going to do now? Am I going to jump back onto the property ladder and buy a house again, which I was not happy with in the first place, or what? So I was in a place where I needed to make a decision quickly again when I got back to the UK. So I went back to work. There was an economic crisis going on in the world at the time. There was not much work around. So I got some work in an agency, working with my managers were Lithuanians and Latvians and Estonians in my own sort of country. They were telling me what to do, sort of thing. And I was like, okay, they're great people, but like going back to a country and being told what to do by other people, from other places. And for me, that was a bit like, to start with, it was like, my God, I've fallen so low here, like factory work again. And then my sister-in-law, she was a former English teacher abroad. She had done the TEFL or CELTA. She said, why don't you become an English teacher? Yeah. you speak English and you like traveling, so why not? So I started looking into this qualification, and I found out that the cheapest place to do this qualification in the world was Riga. Well, in Europe anyway, was Riga. So I had not heard of Latvia before, really. So much didn't know anything about this country. So I just booked the cheapest place to do it. Did the interview, got accepted, and flew to Latvia in 2012 to stay here for 1 month doing this intensive course. And that's what brought me to Latvia.
Interesting. So then what ended up keeping you here? How did you go from 1 month in Latvia to now it obviously no longer being 2012? Now you've been here for some time. Yeah. What did that end up looking like?
Yeah, so on the course, there were 11 other people. And my partner, I say my wife, but she's my fiance actually, because we've never officially got married because it's not been a priority, you know. So my fiance, I met my fiance on the course. She was an English teacher. She had been doing it for a while, and yeah, during the course we sort of clicked, yeah, and yeah. So then at the end of the month, unfortunately, they wouldn't give me a job in Riga because they needed someone with experience. And of course, I was a newly qualified English teacher. So I applied for a job in Moscow, and I flew to Moscow and taught English in Moscow for 1 year. But during this time, we kept in contact. And towards the end of my contract in Moscow, I had decided not to stay there anymore because again, it was back into that loneliness sort of factor again, where I was sharing an apartment with one other guy, but he kept himself in his room all the time. There was no sort of living room. It was just an apartment, 2 bedrooms, kitchen, that's it, yeah. So it didn't really, you know, and the other teachers, because the school chose the apartments for you, they would always get somewhere which was in the cheapest area, which is on the edge of the city. Mm-hmm. I was, you know, on a metro, it was taking me over an hour to get into the centre to work. And of course, other teachers were dotted in other places around the city. So they were dotted in the, you know, Moscow is a huge city. If they're dotted on the, you know, the edge of the east sort of border, and I'm on the west, it's going to take 2 hours to meet up and see each other, yeah. So again, it was isolation on the streets, not really being able to talk too much to people, you know. I говорю по-русски чуть-чуть, you know, I don't speak, you know, I speak Russian very little, yeah. Again, so yeah, I made a decision. I'm not going to, you know, contract myself to another year there. So I spoke to my fiance and said, you know, I'm thinking about coming to Latvia. Do you want to give this relationship a go and see where it progresses? And thankfully, she said, okay, let's see, yeah. And I wrote to the boss of the school where I did the qualification, so he sort of knew me. And I did the qualification with his wife, and he said, yeah, we'd be delighted to have you. And so I came back to Riga, and yeah, I've been in Latvia ever since, so since 2013.
Wow.
Yeah.
A little bit of a bop away, but then an adventure and coming and coming back, maybe not originally expecting that.
Yeah, but even in Moscow, I enjoyed a great amount of time that I spent there, because it's an amazing city, and I do like Russia, yeah, and I do like Russian people, to be honest. You know, I'm not talking about politics here and the politicians, but generally, the people in Russia are very friendly. Invite you into the house, a bit like South America. If you're English, they want to know more about you, because maybe in the Soviet times, this sort of curtain was up and they didn't know too much about us. So now they want to know, what is an English person like? What's an American like? Because we've heard all these bad things about you, but you seem all right, you know, so, and vice versa perhaps as well. So it's nice to you know, it was nice to meet these people, yeah, and form connections there as well. Mm-hmm. So even in Russia, it was an amazing experience. And even when I come to Latvia after a year, and me and my partner did the Siberian Railway from basically Riga to Vladivostok, so traveling through, meeting lots of other people again, sort of couch surfing, staying on people's sofas in their house. and getting the real Russian experience. So that was amazing as well. Yeah. So even with these bumps, you can always take positives from these bumps. Yeah. So, or these difficulties or obstacles in your life. Yeah. You always learn something from it if you want to.
Yeah. And so you eventually ended up in Latvia, you settled in Latvia, you've been here for the last bit. What things have stood out to you here, both positive and challenges? What things did you notice, especially after having been all over the world, having seen different kinds of people, different ways people are with each other? Kind of what are your highlights here?
Yeah, well, I think from my point of view, it depends what you see first in Latvia to how much you enjoy it. Now, most people who come to Latvia, they will discover Riga first and the old town and what goes on there. Yeah, if you move here as an expat or immigrant or refugee or whatever, maybe you go to Riga, you try to meet up with some other expats perhaps because maybe it takes time to get to know Latvians. Maybe a lot of Latvians, it takes a little bit more time, yeah, or you don't know where to meet them, or they're not looking on expat websites to meet foreigners perhaps, yeah. So you go out with other expats, you end up going to all the tourist places in the old town, not the best places. This is not Latvia. The old town is not Latvia. It's a beautiful place, but since after that first year or two, the number of times I've been to the old town since, once a year at most, perhaps, yeah, because it's not somewhere you need to go unless you're bringing a friend over and you say, look at this, it's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, wonderful. It's a good place to see. Yeah, it's not a good place to spend your time because everything's more expensive. The people are probably not local. And sometimes you get the worst kind of people hanging around these places. So in the first, I don't know, first month, first year, whatever, I was out partying, bumping into all kinds of people who are not the most savory people. Yeah, ending up in different districts, dirty districts, nightclubs open 24 hours a day. So you finish 5 o'clock in the morning. Let's go to this one. It opens at 8 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning for people who finish working in the pubs. They go there. So another one, so it's open. So basically in Riga, you can find places that are open 24 hours a day to do this sort of scene, to do this sort of thing. Yeah. So to be honest, I didn't really enjoy the first year or two. Yeah. It's only when I sort of met my partner, we started spending more time together. She took me outside of Riga. She introduced me to her family. She took me and did the things that most Latvians do. Yeah, go to the forest, go to nature, go to these small other towns or villages, go to these coastal places, which not Jumala, yeah, to some other places as well. Jokane with the beautiful cliffs and smaller places, and that's when you really start to understand what Latvia truly is. Yeah, so I think for most people, I know in the teaching profession in Russia, most people stay there a bit longer than a year, because you have say 300 teachers, you have people you can hang around with every weekend and do something with here, do something with. Here, you might only work in a school with 6 teachers. 3 of them are married, 2 of them are in a relationship with someone or local or have family. You're left alone or with one other teacher. So you have that loneliness again. And Latvia is a small place. So after you've spent 1 month here, you probably think you've seen everything because Riga. But of course, there's a lot more to see. But then you don't have transport. You don't have those family connections or local connections to show you what wonderful things are out there and a bit more hidden. So I think Latvia is definitely one of these sort of slow burners. Yeah, it takes you a lot more time to appreciate it than other places like London. When you go to London, it's like, wow, look, so much history, so much beautiful architecture. Different speeds for different places to really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's led me to the position where I'm settled here. I have no inclination to move, to go anywhere else, to go back to the UK. The UK's finished for me. I don't have that connection anymore. here I have 3 children now. Yes, I have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and they keep me busy. Yeah, as you can see, I have no hair now, so I don't have that problem of pulling my hair out. Yeah. So that's life now. I'm very sad. So my life, I've actually, in the end, after all these speed humps, I've actually found what I was looking for in the most unusual place, a place where I never planned to go, a place I never heard of. But now I'm here, yeah, and I have 3 new Latvian additions to terrorize this country. Yeah, so there we go. So yeah, that's the story now, why I'm here and what's going on.
Lovely. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, like, this is not the final thought anyway, because life goes on. Yeah. And our thoughts change every day. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Yeah. One thing is, like, I tend to think too much about the past and too much about the future, and I don't live for what's happening now. Yeah. So maybe we should just, like, really enjoy what we're doing now. Like, for example, this interview, really appreciate it and think, wow, this is a really, good experience, rather than think, oh, I've got to work in 10 minutes, or, oh, I shouldn't have done this last night. So really enjoy what's happening in your life right now, and stop thinking too much about what could happen or what did happen. Yeah. And also, maybe, like, if you're happy with your life right now, then you have no regrets, because if you went back and you changed anything, your life would be different now. Yeah. So you can look back and you can think, yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes, but the mistakes were also learning experiences. And for me now, my life is completely different. I rarely drink, so I'm not that party animal anymore. I've got back into athletics, so I'm running. I'm actually the Latvian 1500-meter champion.
Oh, congratulations.
Over 40-year-olds. I'm in the Veterans League now. So eating healthier food, so my diet is a lot better. I've lost a lot of weight. So Latvia has been really positive me, health-wise anyway, and fitness-wise. If you're unhappy with your life, then look back and think about how you can make those changes. But if you're happy now, the past is the past, forget about it. Just probably don't forget about it, but just learn from those sorts of things that you've experienced. And that's basically it there. So, just one other thing as well. Sorry, just to finish with. Also, living in Latvia has also given me some experiences that I would never have, or opportunities that I would never have in my own country. Because in my own country, everyone speaks English, and probably to a better level than me. Yeah. So here I've been given a few projects to do. So, for example, in the National History Museum in Latvia, they have an exhibition which is Simtgadi, which is 100 years. Yeah, and they have this exhibition about 100 years of Latvian history. And because I know a couple of people like Cesar, who was interviewed with you, and his wife is sort of the head of the museum, they wanted someone to do the English audio guide. So if you walk around this museum, you will hear me telling you about Latvian history. So I learned a lot about that. And the Latvian audio guide is a famous actor, like Vilis Daudzins or something, yeah? So it's like famous Latvian actor, English teacher, yes. So it's nice to have these possibilities. And also in a football tournament, someone needed an English football commentator as well. So I was down there commentating on the football and interviewing some teams as well. So it's like, wow, it's been a really amazing experience to be given these opportunities from friends and colleagues and people you know, yeah. So really, it's so important to have connections here, because they can provide you with opportunities with work. So someone else provided me with a job working for Riga's Pienas Kombināts, working in a milk factory, teaching the managers English, yeah, and that was sort of my job for 3 years as well, which provided a great income into my family and a great opportunity. So yeah, if you can, when you move to a country, form as many connections as you can, good connections, strong connections. Try to go out with them socially as well, not just business connections, because bonding is very important, that friendship, and yeah, just go out there and yeah, do this if you can. Yeah.
Well, Craig, what an adventure. And I feel like it still is probably only a small fraction of everything that has happened in your life, but I'm very happy to hear that you also feel kind of settled and at this point, and now can look back at all these things and share with us. Here are all the different things, where I went, what I did, what I saw, and you're right, it all comes together to who we are right now, and then of course that then moves forward in the future.
So never give up. Yeah. So you know, if you're looking for love, yeah, don't get depressed. There's someone out there for you. If you're looking for a job and you can't find one, keep trying. Yeah, perseverance is key, definitely. Yeah. If you don't look, you will never find, I guess. So there you go.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for letting me express myself and talking to you today. Yeah.